Yes, people, what's happening? Welcome back to the channel and welcome to another video. And a couple of days ago, Chelsea announced that, well, not Chelsea, sorry, Fabrizio Romano reporting with an exclusive that Chelsea are on the verge of signing Ivorian forward from Molde, David Fofana. Now, obviously, not really heard of him before. I don't think many people had heard of him before. It comes as a bit of a shock. Sort of the news came out of nowhere. It must have been one that Todd Boehly and Co have been working on behind the scenes for a while, because a deal like this doesn't just suddenly appear with literally no rumours about it at all either. But yeah, he's very little known. He's Ivorian. Obviously, the last Ivorian centre forward at Chelsea done very well in Didier Drogba. So if he can be half as good as him, then Chelsea are going to have a right player on their hands. I think 21 goals and 7 assists this calendar year, playing for Molde out in Norway. But yeah, relatively unknown. So there's no better guy to get on than the Euro expert himself to give us a little bit more information on Fofana. So, Alex, great to have you as always, mate. What can Chelsea fans expect from Fofana? And I presume that he's going to be one that's going to go out on loan for a season or two before we actually see him in the first team.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. And I'll hook you straight away. Obviously, the last Ivorian forward did very, very well, and he's one of my favourite players of all time. But David Fofana, I would actually liken less Drogba, more Hazard, believe it or not. Even with the goal tally, even with the centre forward positioning. So we'll give a bit of background to Fofana. He's 19 years old, I believe, at the moment. And yes, he's been playing in Norway for just about a year with Molde. He's played in the UEFA Conference League, UEFA Europa League, and in the top flight, Molde got to a first division title. And in the 2022 season, he got 12 non-penalty goals in about 24 games. So he's coming off a good bit of form, and he's kind of exploded since he moved there. And he isn't someone who, okay, while he hasn't been, banded about by mainstream organisations, weirdly enough, I was chatting with a couple of guys, I'll shout them out, Tom Harris and Callum Goodhall, who do a lot of work like me into sort of other leagues. And we were raving about him literally last week, saying this guy, David Fofana, he's an absolute baller. Someone's going to pick him up because these numbers are brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, ironically, Brighton were interested in him. Obviously, Chelsea have taken Graham Potter now, have taken Paul Winstanley as well. Guys that were probably have done a lot of work on Fofana, and Chelsea kind of marched to the front of that queue and seemingly got the deal done. How has Fofana ended up in Norway? Obviously, it's not a natural path to go some sort of the Ivory Coast to Norway. Has he come through the ranks at Molde? Where's he been before? He's been playing in France or anything like that? Just kind of a usual route for young African players to take.
I'm wondering if you say by video, because you're setting up a very interesting answer. So Fofana grew up in the Ivory Coast, and unlike Drogba, well, it's got a really interesting story where he left home about 4 or 5 years old, moved to France, grew up, and then sort of banded about academies. Well, semi-pro teams, more or less, had very little academy football, and he grew up in France. Fofana's played most of his football at home in the Ivory Coast, in Abidjan, the capital. Then last year around December, he's faced with 2 choices to move. One was to Molde in Norway, and the other was to Angers in France. Now, a reason to move there, a reason Drogba moved to France at a young age, is because Ivorians speak French. So it's a very natural step to move to France. That's why there's a few Ivorians kicking about in Ligue 1, one big one being Seko Fofana of Lens that some people have heard of. But this Fofana, David Fofana, he took the harder route. He said he'd visited Molde before, but he later said in an interview that he's kind of relished the personal development and the personal challenge he's had to go through living in a country where I feel like he doesn't speak the language and it's a bit more harder to adjust to than it might have been in France. So he hasn't come up through the academy over there. He's come up in the academy in the Ivory Coast. And I think that shows he's not someone who's pass and move. He's a lot more dribble and go direct. But that hasn't stopped him trying to challenge himself. So he's got a really interesting backstory, in my opinion.
And in terms of kind of positional, where he likes to play most, is he an out and out 9, or is you kind of likened him to Eden Hazard in a way? Is that to suggest that maybe he's like one of those kind of crop of versatile forwards that is equally happy down the middle in that number 9 position, but can also play left or right if necessary?
Yeah, I think he has been playing pretty much exclusively up front for Molde. I mean, last season, I think he came on in small appearances at wing back. I think his future at Chelsea or in the top 5 European leagues is definitely on the wing. And that's because even though if you look through highlight reels of Fofana, he's getting on the end of goals, getting on the end of crosses, making one-touch finishes. What he tends to like to do is take players 1v or 1v1 or even 1v2 in wider areas and drops off the defence at times. And I think that's when he looks at his best. Fofana's best attribute by a country mile is his way to breeze past players. Athletically, he's great, but he's also good at riding challenges in that Hazard-esque way, and especially in a manner of waiting, baiting that defender in, getting them to put a footing, and then just breezing past them, making them almost planted to the spot, making them look like stupid people. So Fofana is great at that, and I think it's actually a bit of a waste to park him as a number 9. I reckon at Chelsea he'll be a wide forward, and he'll be quite a devastating one.
Obviously, the step up in class between the Norwegian league and the Premier League is huge. From the kind of the little bits of Fofana that you've watched and you've seen, do you think that he has got the capabilities and the attributes to make that transition from the Norwegian league to the Premier League? I mean, I don't think Chelsea fans are expecting him to arrive in January and go straight into the team. He's very much likely to probably be sent out on loan for a season or two. But do you think he's got those attributes to make that step up?
Yeah, I think he does. I think he really excels physically, and he can make that physical transition. What he'll need to go on loan to do is to keep working on his finishing. I think compared to another ex-Chelsea player, Mohamed Salah, when Salah moved to Chelsea from Basel, I think it was, his finishing was very inconsistent, and it was when he moved to Roma, and Fiorentina, Roma. I think it was only in his latter time of Serie A where we started to see the Salah we see today, like the lethal finisher. While Fofana has 12 non-penalty goals, he could have a lot more. His expected goals per 90 is about 0.1 more than his goals per 90. And you can see that when he gets in front of goal, he's quite poor at inconsistent at ball striking. So sometimes he's got a fairly easy chance to power the ball in, and it will just be lightly shot into the goalkeeper's gloves. So he needs to work on that, and going to another league will help. The worst thing you probably do right now is park him into a Premier League starting 11. I think Chelsea are making him more of a future buy. Also, he needs to improve his awareness. Sometimes he's definitely got the ability to pick out teammates with good crosses and good touches, good flicks, but he doesn't do it often enough. I've seen a couple of times actually from Molde where he will ignore the square pass or just not see it and blindly shoot, and his teammates will get extremely frustrated with him. So he's got some clear weaknesses to work on. But the good thing is, I think they're quite easy things for a coach to help, to fix, especially the finishing. He's getting into the good positions. He's just not hitting it perfectly. Once those things switch up, he'll be, I think, a very good Premier League player.
Yeah, I mean, just lastly though, mate, do you think this is something that Chelsea fans can be excited about for Fofana arriving? You know, obviously, it's going to be 50-50, I suppose, whether it's going to be a success or not. You always kind of roll the dice and take a little bit of a gamble when you sign young kids from relatively unknown teams. Kind of it either works or it doesn't. If it doesn't work, then you probably sell for a profit anyway. So you've kind of won, but both ways essentially. But Chelsea obviously building under Todd Boehly, they want to build a squad predominantly with players under the age of 25. He does fit into that category, but ultimately, how would you rate this as a transfer? I know it's quite difficult because he's not going to come straight into the first team. We probably won't see him play for Chelsea till at least 2024 at the earliest. So, on early assessment, what are your thoughts on this move?
I'd be raising it fairly high because, yes, like you said, it's not guaranteed he'll ever see minutes in a Chelsea shirt. I can think of a few players who, who've gone on to good things. A personal favourite of mine was Bertrand Traore, and he briefly shone for Chelsea, but he succeeded elsewhere. He just didn't quite make the cut. Ethan Ampadu's at home, right? He looks like he could leave, and he seems more than good enough to play for a Premier League side. Fofana could be one of those that Chelsea just flip for a quick profit, but I think he's got the attributes to play for a Premier League side. Should they nail the loans correctly, then I think in 2024 he could be ready to step into the team, especially under Graham Potter's tutelage. Hopefully he's still there for Chelsea fans. Otherwise, that's a big waste of time, wasn't it? So I'd rate the transfer probably an 8 out of 10.
Oh, well, that's pretty high. I mean, yes, looking forward to seeing how it turns out. We'll probably have to wait a little bit of time to see him. But yeah, exciting information on David Fofana there. Should be confirmed in January, along with Christopher Nkunku, who is officially confirmed as a Chelsea player now. So there's exciting times ahead for Chelsea fans in the transfer market. Not an awful lot to cheer about on the pitch at the moment, but hopefully that changes once the second half of the season gets underway. But Alex, thank you so much for that fantastic insight. Guys, make sure you check out Alex on all socials, Euro Expert, TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, the lot, all linked in the description. So make sure you go and check him out. And I'll catch you again in another video soon, guys. Cheers.